Hello, and welcome to Code Embers, your informatics low-key healthcare podcast that feeds on data and connects concepts to the elements. I'm John Manning in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Mike Wang, out of the Bay Area in California.
And we love to talk about all things informatics today. How are you doing, Mike?
Good. How's your week been?
Pretty good. Pretty busy and heavy into the weeds on the development side, but reassuring overall, and it's fun to do. So,
yeah, definitely. It's a nice break to code when you're not dealing with COVID patients all the time, I suppose.
Yeah, realistically, I think it's a different part of your brain, and I think they're both fulfilling in their own separate ways.
Yeah, certainly.
So today, I think there's a number of things that we could cover, and for people that are just listening to this podcast, as we go through from week to week, our general plan is that we are going to cover at least some element of our core content of informatics, but then also tie this into some of the things that are happening in the news, as well as ways that others can get involved and build from there. And there is a pretty interesting newsworthy article to cover this week, which is the acquisition of Nuance. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, I think it demonstrates that, I think the news we've seen in the last few weeks really shows that most of the, giant players are making a real try to get into medicine now that telemedicine is kicking off, and things are sort of going significant. I think the digitization of medicine has really accelerated in the context of COVID. Like we saw, Amazon's kicking off their telehealth services, and now we see Microsoft making the acquisition of Nuance, and Google announcing like a sign up of patients for their medical record I think in your area, right? Like they're doing it in Atlanta and the Carolinas, I think.
I believe so. I will look into that a little bit more. But realistically, I think this is, it'll be really interesting to see where the big tech once again inserts their footprint into the things that we are using every day within healthcare. And, as we are using, these tools and finding our frustrations with usability, et cetera, the hope are that a lot of these acquisitions and these large scale, power plays and moves will end up feeding down to us at the bedside in a manner that is impactful overall. So I'm looking forward to seeing more. And if it's in the Carolinas, I'm going to be really excited.
Yeah, definitely.
This is it's been an interesting week, at least in terms of big tech within healthcare.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm a little hesitant given Microsoft's track record with acquisitions in the past, but they've been doing a lot of good work recently, I think, in the healthcare space. So excited to see what else they can put together.
Oh yeah, and GitHub, LinkedIn. There's so many large things that we use on a daily basis or on a very frequent basis that are not specific to healthcare, but interesting and important acquisitions that worked out really well. VS Code is another good one.
Yep.
The development platform that I use, Flutter, when they went live with Flutter 2.0 about 6 weeks ago.
Nice.
I know, right? One of the primary key contributors to the open source Flutter tech stack is also Microsoft. And when you're on the topic of free and open source software, there's a lot of large companies that like to get involved and help move these things forwards, and also the community. Ubuntu and even Toyota were some of the other newsworthy items from that. The upcoming cars with Toyota are going to be using Flutter for their layouts, which is pretty cool.
I was just looking. It looks like it's just Atlanta. It's Northern California, Atlanta, and Chicago. It's not in the Carolinas yet.
You got me. Well, hopefully sooner than later. you got me excited and looking forward to that. So we'll see.
We'll just have to drive a couple hours south.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll get there. So, I think one of the things that we had talked about during our last episode was leading into at least a little bit of a discussion on FHIR. And
Yeah.
I think that, for people who have watched my YouTube videos, there may be a bit of confusion as to why there's FHIR in every single one of my videos. This is the other type of FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources by Health Level 7 organization that's been around for 30 to 40 years. And FHIR Draft 1 has been around since 2011. For those who don't know, FHIR is the current global technical standard for interoperability of healthcare data. And all things that can be communicated that are relevant to an electronic medical record, including, a patient or an observation like their vital signs, their blood pressure, their heart rate, their problem list, their health concerns, all listed under as a condition. All of these elements, including medicines and billing and things like that, are listed within this standard so that data can be transmitted from one technical system to another. And that's purely the premise of FHIR. I've found that, or at least from what I've heard and what I've seen, working with FHIR can be a little bit of a challenge, given, if you're not used to working with what's called RESTful APIs, or if you're not used to using the standard messaging methodology that all of our HTTP and websites use, get, post, put, stuff like that, or if you're not used to seeing something that is listed in a JSON JavaScript object notation as a file like that, then it just looks like a huge amount of complexity. And the question is, well, what's the benefit and what's the payload? Is that similar to what you've seen, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we run into a couple of issues. I think FHIR in my experience has been pretty good as a data model for the things where it's mature. I think that the spec around it, the interfacing with that, the REST interface, some of the way search parameters are implemented, can be challenging to actually build apps on top of. And especially I think the key thing here is that it's for the parts of medicine where it's mature and has been well explored. I think it does a good job of representing reality of what the actual data looks like in healthcare. But there are certainly parts of the healthcare experience that it's not sort of designed for. So, for example, if you're building an app on top of FHIR, things like user settings, a lot of your sort of metadata does not, the FHIR is not built for that, and so you really have to, you make this decision between really going all in on FHIR and really customizing it to be able to accommodate sort of user settings and those sorts of things, or you end up having to build sort of, okay, my user settings go here, my clinical data goes there, and then trying to figure out when a piece of data goes in one place or the other can sometimes get a little bit tricky.
Yeah, and there is the use of extensions that you can harness, especially as you're trying to work your way into elements that maybe don't previously exist as a FHIR resource, or could be a more optimized element for something that you're using. But yeah, you're right. There are certainly some challenges as you're trying to get up to speed, either if the data elements don't quite exist or match what you're looking for, or if there isn't a current system that has been in place. But that said, the process of transitioning into FHIR compared to the original draft from 2011 to the second version, which is called DSTU2, the third is STU3, and the current one is R4, as we've gone further and further down that path, you start noticing that more of these elements are available as normative content, which essentially means that they're stable. They've been kind of locked into that area, and they follow a lot of the interversion compatibility rules. So if you ever go to hl7.org/FHIR and you click on the version that you're looking through, and the default is going to be version 4, you'll see a nice green N on the content that's there and has persisted over time, and is something that should be well, I would suggest that as one of the first things that you look through. They also have, and this is with FHIR-FLI, which is one of the European-based companies, I believe in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I think they're based in Amsterdam or something.
No, I think it's Amsterdam. So, yeah, realistically, HL7 and FHIR-FLI come together several times a year and create this Dev Days event, which is the upcoming one is June 7th through 10th, where they're going to be having virtual discussions about some of the cool stuff that are related to and around FHIR, and both of us will actually be speaking on various topics that we have done within the healthcare space. And two of the other people that will be presenting from the physician side will be representing FHIR-FLI, which is one of the means that we have been using to connect to FHIR data, even though you aren't necessarily an expert on FHIR. Certainly by no means would I consider myself an expert in FHIR, but I can use the package that has everything serialized and deserialized. And if I say, hey, I have a condition and I need to add that as a health concern or a problem list, then I just do that. And I think there's some benefit, really, whenever you're looking at something that is incredibly complex, that has then been, I would just say, flattened out a little bit so that you see the elements that you want and you say, this is what I want. And then everything under the engine just works. And it works for you and with you. I see a lot of things that are shifting towards that. And I think that's one of the larger benefits of FHIR, at least right now, given its opportunity to exist in that space, for people that aren't as used to it. That's a lot of words. I'm going to bring in a Flutter example because that's what I know. And it's declarative programming instead of imperative programming. And what you say is, this is what I want, and everything underneath that works for you. And in Flutter, it's a widget. So I want a widget that shows a text box. Okay, and it does that. Or if I want to have multiple text boxes together as a list of widgets in a column, you just say, this is what I want, and everything works under the hood to work with you. Same idea for like a row. And the cool stuff about what you can do with that is then the other elements. Let's say, well, I'm building something in Spanish, or in French, or another language that is left to right aligned. Well, all of my rows are going to be left to right. Whereas if you switch to, Farsi or Arabic or one of the right to left aligned languages, it will make those changes automatically for you without you having to distinguish that. And I think that element of, this is what I want, this is as far as I currently understand and can get down into, and then everything under the hood just working for you, I imagine that's going to be some element of what we see as we're moving forward, specifically with data management in healthcare.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for like clinically opinionated sort of functions when interacting with FHIR. Like, it's pretty difficult as a physician to be like, okay, well, how do I get from a patient and then query the most recent like sodium, serum sodium for that patient, right? That requires a lot of steps. But I think, ultimately we could, there's going to be tooling that allows, either kind of technical clinicians or developers to be able to do those things pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you're going through this, FHIR and these standardized records, and, really they're standards for exchange. You think about for digital imaging and your PACS system, PACS systems, these are, that's DICOM, the digital imaging and communications in medicine. These are important things as you are communicating health data from one element to another. And, there's from the laboratory side, there are laboratory information systems. And, from some aspect of, when you hear of a diagnosis code, where it fits within the ICD or International Classification of Diseases, vocabularies, terminologies, and nomenclatures. Well, every procedure you do, frequently there's a CPT code that is connected to that. Or, a lot of the orders that we have that are within healthcare are tied to a LOINC code, LOINC, logical observation identifiers, names, and codes. And, just as you're going through, if you find you have an interest in informatics as a whole, you may find some of these things to be interesting. Either the development of these standardized terminologies, or you could even go as far as to going into the realm of ontology, if you like. I can't believe I had gone through as much training as I had, and then I went to an informatics conference and I was presenting at something in the ontology section. And it was in that event when I actually realized what is an ontology. I mean, that's, how do you describe the elements that are there? But, as you're looking through it, there is a lot of value of having standardization and consistency amongst fields, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you get data to actually, it's a first step towards semantic interoperability, which I think I won't go into too much here, but
Oh, no, we should go way deep into the weeds. Absolutely. And you know what, the fun little spoiler is I love the curly braces problem.
yeah,
Because if you use that word, an informatician will just be like, oh, yeah, okay. And most other people are like, what on earth are you even talking about? And I think that is one of the really, really good opportunities, that one of the things that really speaks to the strength of having good, high quality data that is interoperable. Because if you fix that, then the curly braces problem goes away.
yeah. For the non-clinicians in the room, my sort of plain word definition of semantic interoperability is, is solving something like, so let's say someone checked your sugar level, and the doctor was like, was that sugar level checked in an emergency room visit? I want to be able to look in that. I need to be able to take that sugar level with that context, and then have someone ingest it into another healthcare system and also realize that this was a sugar level that was checked during an emergency room visit. You would think that is easy to do, but is it actually extraordinarily hard to do right now? Like I think, with some of the new, and potentially we could get into this too, like with the 21st Century Cures Act and some of the requirements there, I think it is the foundations are in place for, for people to realize that, there was a sugar level that was checked for Mr. Smith, right? I think that sort of level of interoperability is starting to be put in place, but that whole context around it is still not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'd still like the blood pressure analogy, where health system A stores blood pressure and they separate it out based on the cuff versus on an arterial line.
Yeah.
Whereas health system B stores their data for blood pressure, where systolic is one thing and diastolic is its own separate field.
Yeah.
And then there's mean arterial pressure.
Yeah.
And then health system C separates if it's by your arm or your leg. And it's all a blood pressure.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah.
And, if you're trying to get insights from that, you have blood pressure, and then you have a whole bunch of curly braces in between, and then you have the insights that are there,
Yeah.
which make it really painful. But once you have a standardization of both the data that you're using, USCDI would be another one, a good example for that. Version 2 of the United States core data for interoperability and FHIR together. The analogy that I heard at one AMIA conference that I love is, think of USCDI as kind of your thesaurus, or the dictionary of all the data fields that are there. And then FHIR is the way that you're communicating that from one to the other. So it's almost like the language that you're using to get that point across. And I think that's a pretty cool way to consider this.
Yeah, it's the FHIR is supposed to be the lingua franca, right?
Yeah.
It's like, imagine trying to do finance if everybody used different numeral systems.
Yeah, I mean, well, the XKCD comic of there are 14 standards. How do we address this? Well, let's create a new standard.
Yeah.
It's that. And, realistically, I think that we need something that is enforcing and fully supported at that level of standardization, so that we can all finally be using the same language, so that now we're a little bit less siloed and we can build from there. And even though I don't consider myself a FHIR expert at all, I know how to work with FHIR data. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And I think that using that in a manner that's helpful is really, that should be where we're going moving forward.
Yeah, and I think even so much of it is just getting the categorization right, like knowing that labs and vitals all go into observations, right? So that in the future, all physicians know, or any consumer of data, healthcare data, just knows like, okay, I go look for observations, and this is where I go for labs and vitals. And even if something more complex like a microbiology report isn't done exactly the same way, at least to go there. That's where you go look for these things, right? Like that already saves a lot of time. Because in the EHR now, like you have to go hunt around sometimes things are in the radiology tab, sometimes things are in the laboratory tab, sometimes you have to go to the outside record tab. It's just there's so many places where things can be found.
Yeah, and it also kind of fits with these data are also continuing to grow a bit. We could talk to gravity and some of the social determinants of health efforts that are defining and refining the way that we use these terms in healthcare, so that we can help our patients overall. I think that also fits with that same process of how you can take these and move the needle forward, but do this interoperably.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think something I think that people often forget is that FHIR is only supposed to get you like at most 80% of the way there, right? Like they acknowledge that there's going to be extensions and customization for the last 20% of a given use case. But the idea is if you have the core sort of like objects and principles in place, then you get those benefits of interoperability long term. And I think something that is often not understood is that interoperability is not just a long term thing across between two different organizations. It's often even something that internally within a healthcare system or within a company is unsolved.
Yeah, absolutely. So each episode we have some aspect of content that we'll cover for those that are less familiar with informatics. We'll explain it and show how that ties to healthcare. What we also like to do, because we are apparently obsessed with analogies here, we like to give random analogies. Mike, do you have any analogy for us to give today, or connection to the elements?
Connection to the elements for today, huh? Let's see. So my analogy that I've recently had for FHIR is for those of you who live in the Bay Area, there's a freeway called the 280. It's a bit of a funny freeway. It cuts through the heart of downtown, and it connects it's sort of like a shortcut for the 101, which is one of the interstates in that run through the city. but it doesn't quite connect the southern portion of the 101 to the northern portion of the 101. It comes just about 2 blocks short as far as being like a freeway. So I often will say that, I don't know, I think of FHIR as a wide road. If it can get you where you need to go, you really should use it. Just because it isn't perfect and complete doesn't mean you should completely abandon it and exclude it from your navigation. So I guess this is a very, very roundabout way of saying that FHIR is sort of like a road, which is sort of the earth element. Sorry.
When do we get Captain Planet? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's not quite hard.
Not quite hard. Yeah, we'll get there. No, we'll get there. Or maybe we can make an Avatar reference, it's much better. Oh, love that show. But yeah, okay. All right, I'll accept it. So we've done fire, we've done earth. And I guess, well, who knows what we'll do next time. I guess we did do, does koi pond count? Does that actually count?
Is koi pond going to be our water?
Is that our water one?
It could be.
Because we kind of talked about that last time. So it was really more the fish than the ponds, but I guess it could be both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Mike, do you have any tech hacks for us today?
Hacks.
Or life hack? Or I guess, are we going to do these as life hacks? Or are we going to use them as tech hacks? Or does it matter?
I don't know. I think anything applies.
Okay.
Just a hack.
Yeah, that's fair. Just a hack. You got to hack something. All right. What are you going to hack today?
All right. So my life hack for this week is that I've discovered that using the having an alarm on my smartwatch with the on the vibrate setting is good for just waking up myself in the morning without having to disturb the dog or my partner in the morning. If I have to wake up at some ungodly hour like 5:30.
Assuming you don't sleep through it.
Assuming you don't sleep through it, yes.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give a life hack. On many systems, including on your electronic medical record or on Windows or on things like that, you will have a little letter under some element. So if it says shut down, the U will be underlined. And if you ever see that, either pressing that letter or Alt in that letter will usually be the keyboard shortcut that will get you that same action. So a good example on Windows, if you press Alt and then spacebar, it brings the element that shows up at the very top. And then if you press C, that will actually close the window that is physically there. So that's a very fast way to close a window with barely moving your hand if you have that rested on the keyboard. But that little underline is extremely useful, especially as you're working through some of the major vendor EMRs, because you can press like Alt and I and that will sign your order. Or you can press maybe Alt and C and that will start to open the patient's chart or things along those lines. So just be on the lookout for an underline under some text over a single letter, because that may actually be a shortcut that you haven't learned yet.
That's pretty cool. I hadn't known that.
Yeah. A good friend of mine from college, his laptop screen was completely broken, and he could turn his computer on, log in, load a document editing software, and type everything in real-time stream of consciousness without access to a monitor.
That's pretty
And
funny.
he could also do this for music and for all sorts of other really cool stuff. He was very good at keyboard shortcuts, and learned a handful of things just from, he had a broken laptop, and he figured out how to work around that without a screen. And just imagine going back home or into your dorm or whatever, plugging your laptop onto your monitor, and then looking at all of the stream of consciousness words that you just wrote down, assuming you actually got the keyboard shortcuts to open your word editing software.
That's crazy. I mean, I was trying. I think my dream would be to have that sort of almost like mental operating system combined with a one-handed keyboard would make me much more productive.
Oh yeah. And many systems control ? Will open that up, or command ? That'll actually start to show you, because you can't learn all of those at once. There's no point. But learning a couple of them here and there can be super, super useful. So cool.
Cool.
Well, pleasure as always. I have not thought of a catchy thing to end with. So, yeah, I guess we're on to the next one.
On to the next one. On to Cleveland.
On to the next one. Well, I usually say stay safe out there. You think that would be good?
Okay.
I don't know. Do you have a catchy title? And do you have a catchy end? Question mark?
No.
Question mark? No? Okay.
That's the way the ashes crumble.
That's the way the ashes crumble. Awesome. All right. Sounds good. So with all of that said, thanks for joining us on Code Embers. I'm John Manning.
Mike Wang.
And take care, everyone. Stay safe out there.